In the heart of a verdant valley, where the whispers of the past mingled with the rustle of leaf and bough, lay the town of Eldoria. This quaint town, cradled by ancient woods and lush, rolling hills, seemed to pulse with an energy as old as the earth itself. The centerpiece of this serene landscape was the heartwood, a colossal tree that towered over the town square, its massive branches a canopy of green that stretched towards the heavens, roots deep as the secrets it was rumored to keep. Morning light filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the cobblestones below, as townsfolk prepared for the day. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of wildflowers and the warm, earthy aroma of freshly baked bread from Mrs. Daly's bakery. It was a place out of time, where every stone, every tree seemed to have a story. Eldoria, with her notebook tucked under her arm, walked through the bustling town square. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, observed the familiar scene with a scientist's precision and a local's affection. The townspeople of Eldoria lived in harmony with the land, their lives deeply intertwined with the rhythms of nature. It was here, among the ancient traditions and whispered legends of the heartwood's protective powers, that Eldoria had grown up. Yet, for all her years in Eldoria, she remained a skeptic, trusting her microscope more than the myths of old. As she passed the heartwood, her gaze lingered on its gnarled surface. "Still standing after all these years, aren't you?" she mused softly, running her fingers over the rough bark. The tree was said to be as old as Eldoria itself, perhaps older. Some said it was a sentinel, watching over them, safeguarding them against unseen dangers. Turning her attention away from the tree, Eldoria made her way to the Nature Conservatory, a repository of knowledge and a second home to her. The building was modest, edged with climbing ivy and surrounded by gardens that Eldoria tended with meticulous care. Inside, the air was cool, filled with the scent of moss and old books. Her workstation was a clutter of plant samples, soil jars, and stacks of botanical texts. As she settled in, preparing for a day of research, Eldoria's thoughts wandered to her mother, Miriam. A renowned botanist in her own right, Miriam had spent her final years obsessed with proving the scientific significance of the heartwood. Her journals, filled with sketches and notes, were now Eldoria's most treasured possessions. "You saw something in the old myths, didn't you, Mom?" Eldoria whispered, tracing the lines of her mother's handwriting. It was a dialogue she continued in her mind, debating, questioning, never quite accepting. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Eldoria examined leaf samples under her microscope, recording her observations with a meticulousness that her mother would have admired. The conservatory buzzed with the low hum of other researchers and the occasional visitor, drawn by curiosity about Eldoria's flora. By midday, the town square was vibrant with activity. Market stalls brimmed with produce, crafts, and the laughter of Eldorians enjoying the day. Eldoria often took her lunch in the square, enjoying the connection to her community, a reminder of the balance she sought between her scientific pursuits and her roots. Today, however, was different. As Eldoria stepped out into the sunlight, her eyes were drawn irresistibly back to the heartwood. It stood majestic and firm, yet she felt an unspoken change in the air, a tension that seemed to hum through the ground itself. Her scientific mind dismissed the feeling as fanciful, yet the question lingered, unvoiced, as she continued her watchful observation. "It's just a tree," she told herself, not fully believing it. The heartwood, like everything in Eldoria, was woven into the fabric of her life, a symbol of the enduring mysteries that science had yet to unravel. As she returned to the conservatory, Eldoria felt the weight of the unanswered questions her mother had left behind, and a determination to find the truth, however it presented itself. In Eldoria, the line between the known and the unknown was as delicate as the spider's web, glistening in the morning dew, waiting to be explored. As the afternoon sun crept higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestone paths of Eldoria, Eldoria sat in the quiet sanctuary of the Nature Conservatory, surrounded by her research. Each specimen of leaf and petal was a puzzle piece in the grand tapestry of nature she was determined to understand. The hum of activity around her slowly ebbed as other researchers took their leave for the day, leaving Eldoria in a bubble of solitude, enveloped in her work. Her focus was absolute, each plant sample telling its own story under the gaze of her microscope. "What secrets do you hold?" she would often whisper to them, half expecting them to whisper back the mysteries of their existence. It was a meticulous process, but to Eldoria, it was more than just science. It was a bridge to her past, to her mother, Miriam, whose presence felt palpable in the quiet moments amidst the flora. Suddenly, her concentration was broken by the sound of footsteps approaching. It was Mr. Penrose, the elderly curator of the conservatory, his face wreathed in worry. "Eldoria, have you heard?" he asked, his voice carrying a tremor that was unusual for the typically stoic man. "Heard what, Mr. Penrose?" Eldoria replied, her eyebrows knitting together in concern as she turned from her microscope. "It's the heartwood. Something's not right with it. People are saying it looks different," he explained, struggling to find the right words. Eldoria felt a surge of curiosity mixed with a hint of dread. Not right? What could that mean? She thought, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. Deciding she needed to see for herself, she grabbed her notebook and followed Mr. Penrose out of the conservatory, her steps quickening with anticipation. The town square was quieter now, the earlier bustle replaced by a tense, hushed atmosphere. As they approached the heartwood, Eldoria could see why. The tree, usually a vibrant hub of energy and color, now looked subdued, its leaves dull and some branches sagging unnaturally. "See what I mean?" Mr. Penrose pointed out, his voice a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the tree further. Eldoria walked around the heartwood, her gaze analytical. She reached out, touching the bark, feeling the rough texture under her fingertips. It was cooler than usual, the life force that once pulsed strong now a faint tremor. This wasn't just a natural ailment. It was something more, something deeper. Could this be what Mom was searching for? A real, tangible connection to the myths? She thought, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She remembered her mother's words from the journals, speaking of energy, of life forces connected by the unseen threads of the natural world. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Eldoria decided to start her own investigation. She would need samples, data, perhaps even delve into those old myths her mother had chased. The thought was daunting, yet exhilarating. This was her chance to connect the dots, to possibly bridge the gap between science and the supernatural, between her mother's legacy and her own path. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the heartwood, Eldoria felt a resolve settle within her. She would find the answers, no matter where they led her. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with unknowns, but it was a path she knew she was destined to follow. Returning to the conservatory, she prepared her tools and equipment, her mind already forming hypotheses. The night would be long, and the work hard, but for Eldoria, each step was a step closer to understanding the true nature of the heartwood, and perhaps, a step closer to understanding herself and the mysteries that her mother had left behind in the shadows of the ancient tree. The line between the known and the unknown was not just to be explored, it was to be understood, and Eldoria was ready to follow it wherever it led. As twilight draped its velvet cloak over Eldoria, the arrival of a new figure marked a turning point. The stranger walked with a charismatic swagger into the town square, where the last hues of sunset played on the cobblestones. He was a tall man, with keen green eyes that seemed to capture and reflect the fading light. Dressed in a sharp, dark coat that contrasted with the rustic attire of the townsfolk, he brought with him an air of the unknown, a whisper of change. The townspeople paused in their tasks, curious eyes following his every move. His name was Corvin, and though new to Eldoria, he carried himself with the ease of one who knows exactly where he belongs. He made his way to the central fountain, where he paused, looking up at the heartwood with an inscrutable smile. What brings such a man to Eldoria? Eldoria wondered, her gaze locked on him from across the square. She had returned to gather more samples and had not expected the quiet evening to pivot into something more intriguing. Corvin turned, and his gaze met Eldora's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He approached her with a confident stride, extending his hand in greeting. "I'm Corvin," he said, his voice smooth, holding an accent that hinted at far-off places. "And you are?" "Eldora," she replied, taking his hand cautiously. His handshake was firm, assured. "You're new here." "Indeed," Corvin replied, his eyes twinkling with an unreadable expression. "I've come to explore opportunities in Eldoria. I've heard much about your heartwood. It's quite the local legend, isn't it?" Eldora nodded, her curiosity piqued. "It is. But it's more than just legend to us. It's part of our history, our culture. A fascinating intersection of nature and culture, then," Corvin mused, looking back at the tree. "I'm particularly interested in how such elements can be utilized." Utilized? The word rang alarm bells in Eldora's mind. She eyed him, a flicker of unease stirring within her. "Utilized how?" "In many ways," Corvin said, his smile broadening. "But tell me, as a local and a scientist, what do you think is happening to it? It looks rather under the weather, doesn't it?" Eldora studied his face, trying to decipher his true interest. "I'm currently studying that," she admitted cautiously. "Why the sudden interest in our heartwood? Let's just say I have a vested interest in unique botanical phenomena," Corvin replied enigmatically. "Perhaps we can help each other." As the night deepened, they discussed the heartwood, Corvin listening intently to Eldora's scientific perspective, occasionally nodding or interjecting with sharp, insightful questions. Despite her reservations, Eldora found herself drawn into the conversation, intrigued by his knowledge and his mysterious allure. However, as they parted ways, a thought lingered in Eldora's mind, echoing with her mother's warnings about two charming strangers bearing their own agendas. What does he really want with the heartwood? She pondered, her scientist skepticism mingling with a growing suspicion. The next morning, as Eldora resumed her research, the image of Corvin's keen, calculating eyes stayed with her. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that his arrival and the heartwood's ailment might be more connected than they appeared. Determined to uncover the truth, Eldora decided to keep a closer eye on Corvin. After all, in Eldoria, where the lines between the natural and the supernatural blurred, every new variable must be thoroughly understood. And so, with her resolve renewed, Eldora prepared to delve deeper into both her scientific inquiry and the mystery of Corvin's true intentions. Morning in Eldoria broke with a crispness that hinted at the approach of autumn. The town square, usually vibrant with the daily hustle of vendors and chatter, felt subdued under the gray wash of dawn. Eldora, wrapped in a light shawl, hastened her steps towards the heartwood, her mind crowded with thoughts of the previous evening's conversation with Corvin. As she approached, the stark change in the heartwood was even more apparent in the cool light of morning. The once lush leaves were now dulled, tinged with brown, and the air around it, usually buzzing with the faint hum of life, was now eerily silent. Eldora's heart tightened. The tree's distress seemed to mirror her own growing concerns. Something is leeching the life from it, but what? She pondered, her gaze tracing the sprawling roots that surfaced here and there, gnarled and desperate. Pulling out her notebook, she jotted down her observations, her handwriting tight with urgency. She needed samples, not just of the leaves, but also the soil around the roots, and perhaps some of the bark. Her scientific mind kicked into full gear as she collected her samples meticulously, labeling each one with the precision of a seasoned researcher. As she worked, her thoughts flickered to Corvin's unsettling interest in the heartwood. Could he know something about what's happening here? The idea seemed far-fetched, but Eldora couldn't dismiss it outright. His timely arrival, his probing questions, and his cryptic statements all seemed too coincidental. Once her samples were secured, she headed back to the conservatory. Her path crossed with some early risers who greeted her with nods and murmurs of concern about the heartwood. It was clear the tree's plight was becoming a town-wide worry, sparking fears of bad omens and ill fortune. Back at the conservatory, Eldoria spent hours under the microscope, her eyes scanning over cellular structures, searching for pathogens, signs of disease, or any anomalies. Yet, everything appeared normal, frustratingly so. No signs of common diseases or pests. Could it be something unnatural? This thought lingered, unwelcome but persistent. Mid-morning brought a knock on her lab door. It was Corvin, leaning casually against the frame, his expression one of mild curiosity. "Good morning, Eldoria. How goes the investigation?" Eldoria, startled yet composed, didn't miss the flicker of something intense, almost eager, in his eyes. "It's progressing," she said, her tone neutral. "Why the interest, Corvin? You seem very invested in our heartwood." "Just a personal fascination with ancient trees and their lore," he replied smoothly. "They often hide secrets worth uncovering, don't you think?" Eldoria watched him closely, a silent acknowledgement of the subtext. Yes, secrets indeed. She decided to play along, her own curiosity about Corvin's intentions growing. "Perhaps you'd like to see some of what I've found?" she offered, gesturing to the microscope. Corvin accepted, peering into the lens. "Fascinating," he murmured, though Eldoria suspected he saw nothing out of the ordinary. "And no answers yet?" "None that explain this," Eldoria admitted, her frustration clear. She then shifted the conversation. "You seem to know a lot about plants, Corvin. Ever encountered anything like this before?" Corvin straightened, his eyes locking with hers, a spark of challenge in them. "Maybe once, in a distant place. But that was a very different context. These things can be complex." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Penrose, who looked between them, sensing the tension. "Eldoria, there's a council meeting today. They want your input on the heartwood." As Corvin excused himself, Eldoria's mind raced. The council meeting would be critical, but so was understanding Corvin's role in all this. As she prepared her notes, she knew what she needed to do. She would present her findings at the meeting, but she would also keep a careful watch on Corvin. The health of the heartwood, and perhaps the safety of Eldoria, might well depend on what she could uncover about this enigmatic new arrival. Her resolve hardened. This was no longer just a scientific pursuit, but a battle for the heart of her beloved town. As the sun climbed higher, bathing Eldoria in a wash of golden light, the townsfolk began to gather in the old town hall, a building as steeped in history as the heartwood itself. Its walls, lined with portraits of past council members, seemed to watch over the proceedings with silent gravity. Today, the hall was charged with a palpable tension, as the community awaited Eldoria's insights into the heartwood's sudden decline. Eldoria, her notes tucked securely under her arm, felt a flutter of nerves as she stepped into the hall. The rows of faces turned towards her were a mix of concern and curiosity. She found her place at the front, near the aged oak podium that had heard many years of Eldoria's trials and triumphs. Mayor Thompson, a stout man with a voice that commanded attention, opened the meeting. "We've come together in troubling times," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "The heartwood, our protector and symbol of strength, suffers. We turn now to Miss Eldoria, who has been studying its condition closely." Eldoria stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. "Thank you, Mayor Thompson. As you all know, the heartwood is not just a tree, it is a cornerstone of our community's heritage and well-being." She paused, ensuring she had their full attention. "My investigations so far show no typical signs of disease or pests. The symptoms the heartwood exhibits are unusual, and suggest the possibility of an external influence affecting its vitality." A murmur rippled through the hall. Eldoria continued, "I've taken samples and conducted tests, but the answers are still elusive. What is clear, however, is that this is no ordinary affliction." From the back, a voice called out, "What sort of external influence?" Are we talking about sabotage? It was Mr. Weller, the local blacksmith, his brow furrowed in concern. Ellara hesitated, her mind racing. How much should I reveal about my suspicions regarding Corvin? It's a possibility we cannot ignore, she finally said. We need to consider all potential threats, from environmental factors to deliberate interference. As the discussion grew heated, Corvin, who had taken a seat near the rear of the hall, watched with an inscrutable expression. His eyes occasionally met Elara's, a silent challenge in their depths. After the meeting, Ellara was surrounded by townspeople asking questions and expressing their fears. Amid the chaos, Corvin approached her, his manner calm and collected. A stirring presentation, Ellara. You have the town's ear, and its fears, he remarked quietly. Ellara regarded him coolly. Do I have yours, Corvin? She asked, her tone a blend of suspicion and curiosity. In a manner of speaking, he replied. I believe I could offer some insights into your research. Perhaps a fresh perspective on the problem. Ellara considered his offer. Collaborating with Corvin could provide her with the opportunity to learn more about his intentions and possibly uncover any hidden motives. I'll consider it, she finally said, non-committal. As the town hall emptied, Elara's thoughts were a whirlwind. The meeting had raised more questions than answers, and Corvin's offer, though potentially useful, added another layer of complexity to the situation. She needed to tread carefully, balancing her scientific inquiry with the need to protect Eldoria from potential harm. That evening, as Eldoria lay quiet under a starlit sky, Ellara sat by her window, her eyes on the silhouette of the heartwood in the distance. The weight of her responsibility felt heavy on her shoulders. This is more than a scientific challenge, she realized. It's a test of my ability to safeguard my home, my heritage. With that resolve, she prepared for the days ahead, knowing they would demand from her a blend of scientific acumen and cunning she had never before had to summon. Under the cloak of a moonless night, Elara's laboratory at the conservatory became a crucible of light and activity. The silence of the hour made her every movement echo with significance as she prepared to delve deeper into the mysteries of the heartwood. The microscope's lens gleamed under the harsh light, a silent ally in her quest for truth. As she organized her samples methodically, Elara's mind replayed the day's discussions. The town's palpable fear had transformed the serene hall into a theater of anxiety and suspicion. She knew the importance of her next steps, not just for the heartwood, but for the entire community of Eldoria. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced with the gravity of what she might discover. Tonight she wasn't alone in her scientific pursuit. After some deliberation, she had decided to take Corvin up on his offer, curious to uncover whether his insights held any real value or if they were merely another layer of his mysterious veneer. As footsteps approached the lab, Ellara looked up to see Corvin entering, his presence filling the room with a charged air. Good evening, Ellara. Ready to uncover some secrets? Corvin's voice was smooth, almost too calm for the late hour. Ellara nodded, her expression resolute. Let's get started. I want to look at the cellular structure of these samples again. Maybe we missed something the first time. Together, they leaned over the microscope, their heads close, eyes focused. Corvin's presence was unsettling yet oddly invigorating. His knowledge about botany was undeniable, as he pointed out nuances in the cellular makeup that Ellara hadn't fully considered. See here? Corvin pointed at the screen, his finger hovering over an image of distorted plant cells. This isn't typical cell damage from disease. It looks more like a reaction to a chemical agent. Elara's brow furrowed. Asterisk, a chemical agent? Could someone be poisoning the heartwood? Asterisk, the thought was chilling. Why would anyone target the heartwood, though? She murmured, more to herself than to Corvin. Many reasons, political, personal, or perhaps something more sinister, Corvin replied, his voice a whisper of intrigue. This tree is a symbol of Eldoria's unity and strength. Weakening it could be a strategic move by someone wanting to shake the town's foundations. As they worked through the night, analyzing each sample with meticulous care, Eldoria found herself caught between her scientific objectivity and the growing web of conspiracy theories. With each slide they examined, the line between natural and unnatural causes blurred further. Around them, the night deepened, shadows playing across the lab's walls, mirroring the darkening trail of their investigation. Every discovery led to more questions, every answer hinting at larger, more dangerous truths waiting in the shadows. As dawn approached, painting the sky with streaks of gray and pink, Eldoria and Corvin stepped back from their work, exhausted yet enlightened. They had discovered enough anomalies to confirm that the Heartwood's affliction was no act of nature. It was orchestrated, deliberate. "Where do we go from here?" Eldoria asked, her voice heavy with fatigue and concern. Corvin looked at her, his green eyes sharp with a predatory glint. "Now we find the who and the why. And for that, Eldoria, we might need to look closer to home than you'd like." The implication of his words hung in the air, a new chill settling between them. As Corvin left, Eldoria remained in the lab, the first light of dawn casting long shadows over her determined face. The battle lines were drawn not just around the Heartwood, but within Eldoria itself, and she knew the real work was just beginning. She turned back to her microscope, her resolve like steel. This is more than science now, she thought. It's a fight for the soul of Eldoria. As the town awoke, Eldoria was ready, armed with her findings and braced for the confrontations that would surely come. The truth was out there, and she would uncover it, no matter the cost. As the new day dawned, Eldoria's laboratory was bathed in the soft light of early morning, casting long, slender shadows across her notes and equipment. Despite the previous night's revelations, the questions that now swirled in her mind were like dark clouds threatening a storm. Who would want to harm the Heartwood? And why? These questions haunted her as she prepared for the challenges of the day. Eldoria decided to take a proactive approach. With a list of potential suspects and motives drafted, she ventured out into the town, her determination steeling her against the undercurrent of unease that gripped Eldoria. The first stop was the town hall, where she requested access to recent council meeting minutes and any records of disputes or unusual activities related to the Heartwood. Mayor Thompson, a bit taken aback by her request yet seeing the earnestness in her eyes, agreed reluctantly. "Eldoria, I hope you know what you're doing," he murmured as he handed her the documents. "Stirring up old conflicts might not sit well with everyone." Eldoria nodded, her mind racing. "I need to see the bigger picture," she thought as she pored over the documents in the quiet corner of the town library. The records were a revelation. Disagreements over land use near the Heartwood, proposals for commercial development that had been vehemently opposed, and a few names that kept cropping up, businessmen and local politicians with interests in expanding Eldoria's tourism sector. Her investigation took her next to the local archives, where more clues awaited. Dusty ledgers and old correspondence hinted at long-standing grudges and financial pressures. Eldoria was meticulous, copying down everything that might form a piece of the puzzle. As the sun reached its zenith, casting a harsh light over the town, Eldoria's next steps led her to confront those whose names had appeared most frequently in her research. One such encounter was with Mr. Harrow, a property developer whose ambitious plans had been thwarted by the town's protective stance over the Heartwood area. "Ms. Eldoria, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Mr. Harrow asked, his tone polite but his eyes wary. Eldoria was direct, her fatigue from the long night tempered by her resolve. "I'm investigating the recent issues with the Heartwood, Mr. Harrow. Your name has come up a few times in relation to disputes about land development. Can you tell me more about your plans for the area?" Mr. Harrow stiffened, his facade of cordiality slipping slightly. "My plans were public and purely for the town's benefit, which is more than I can say for some. I wanted to bring in more tourists, more prosperity. But some people are too short-sighted to see the benefits. Eldoria noted his defensiveness. Were you opposed enough to take action against the heartwood? She pressed, watching his reaction closely. The man laughed, a hollow sound. You're barking up the wrong tree, young lady. I fight my battles in council meetings, not by poisoning trees. Thanking him for his time, Eldoria left with more questions than answers. Each conversation, each piece of data added layers of complexity to the investigation. The day wore on, and Eldoria's list of suspects grew, but the definitive proof remained elusive. Exhausted yet undeterred, Eldoria returned to her laboratory. The pieces were there, but the puzzle remained incomplete. As she sat, reviewing her notes under the dim light of her desk lamp, a sudden realization dawned on her. What if the motive wasn't just economic or political? What if it's personal, driven by something, or someone, entirely unexpected? The thought was a spark in the dry tinder of her theories. Resolute, Eldoria knew her next step. She needed to revisit the heartwood itself. Perhaps the tree held the final clues in its dying whispers. With her equipment in hand, she set out as the sun dipped below the horizon, ready to face whatever truths lay hidden in the twilight shadows of Eldoria. As twilight embraced Eldoria, the landscape transformed into a canvas of deep blues and purples, the heartwood standing as a solemn silhouette against the fading light. Eldoria's steps were measured, each one bringing her closer to the ancient tree, a nexus of natural beauty and whispered secrets. The air around her was crisp, laced with the scent of pine and the undercurrent of an impending night chill. Upon reaching the heartwood, Eldoria set down her equipment with reverence, her eyes scanning the gnarled bark and the sprawling roots that had become like exposed veins, signs of the tree's struggle. She set up her portable analysis equipment, preparing to take soil samples directly beneath the tree's immense canopy. This is where I might find my answers, she mused, her thoughts tinged with both anticipation and apprehension. As she worked, the wind whispered through the branches above, a mournful sound that seemed almost communicative. Eldoria paused, her hand stilled by the eerie sensation that the tree itself was aware of her presence. Are you trying to tell me something? She thought, a shiver running through her despite her scientific skepticism. The soil samples she collected were darker than usual, dense with organic matter yet somehow lifeless. She prepared slides for her portable microscope, examining the granules that might hold traces of the chemical agent Corvin had suggested. As she adjusted the focus, her breath caught. The granules were suffused with a faint, unnatural luminescence. Artificial, but why here? She whispered to herself, documenting her findings meticulously. The presence of a synthetic compound was damning evidence that someone had indeed tampered with the soil. But understanding the compound's purpose required more than just identification. It required context, a narrative that explained the why behind the what. Determined to gather more evidence, Eldoria decided to explore the area surrounding the heartwood. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, casting long shadows as she moved. It was then she noticed something unusual. A subtle path worn into the ground, hidden from casual view, leading away from the heartwood towards the denser part of the forest. Curiosity piqued, Eldoria followed the path, her senses heightened. The trail ended at a small clearing, where the moonlight revealed a startling scene. Several empty chemical containers hidden among the underbrush, their labels peeling but still legible enough to show hazardous symbols. Heart racing, Eldoria took photos and collected one of the containers for analysis. Who would go to such lengths to hide this? And how deep does this deception run? She wondered, her mind racing with the implications of her discovery. Her return to the heartwood felt heavier, burdened with the weight of her findings. She looked up at the tree, its branches swaying slightly as if in response to her turmoil. I will find out who did this to you, she promised, a fierce whisper lost to the wind. Back at her laboratory, the night deepened as Eldoria ran tests on the chemical residue from the container. The analysis confirmed her worst fears. The substance was a potent herbicide, capable of weakening even the hardiest of trees. Someone wasn't just targeting the heartwood, they were intent on killing it. Exhausted but driven by a newfound resolve, Eldoria compiled her evidence, preparing to confront the council with her findings the following day. The betrayal, she realized, was not just against the tree but against all of Eldoria. As dawn approached, painting the sky with the first light of morning, Eldoria knew the coming day would bring confrontation, and perhaps, the beginning of healing. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, leading her to a showdown that would reveal the depth of corruption festering at the heart of her beloved town. As the first rays of the morning sun painted the skies in hues of orange and pink, Eldoria began to stir, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. Today was the day of the annual Heartwood Festival, a celebration that had always brought joy and unity to the town. But this year, the festival had a different undercurrent, woven with threads of tension and anticipation. Eldoria, having spent another sleepless night in her laboratory, gathered her evidence meticulously. The photographs of the hidden containers, the chemical analysis reports, and her detailed observations, all were organized into a clear, compelling argument. She felt the weight of Eldoria's trust on her shoulders as she prepared to expose the corruption that threatened their cherished heartwood. As the town square filled with colorful banners and the cheerful sounds of music, Eldoria made her way to the council's pavilion, a structured platform set up for official announcements during the festival. The council members, including Mayor Thompson, were already assembling, their faces masks of celebratory smiles that barely hid their unease about the day's additional agenda. Eldoria was granted a moment to speak, a slot just before the festival's opening ceremonies. As she stepped up to the podium, her gaze swept over the crowd, families, elders, and children, all gathered in the shadow of the ailing heartwood. She cleared her throat, her voice amplifying across the square. Fellow citizens of Eldoria, today I stand before you not just to celebrate our history, but to defend our future. Eldoria began, her voice steady. The heartwood, our town's symbol of strength and unity, is dying, not from natural causes, but from a deliberate act. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as Eldoria continued, revealing her findings. She presented the photos of the hidden containers, explained the nature of the chemicals, and detailed the locations of her discoveries. With each piece of evidence, the murmurs grew louder, turning into gasps of disbelief and anger. Mayor Thompson, visibly shaken, took a step forward. This is a grave accusation, Miss Eldoria. Do you have proof of who is responsible for this? Eldoria nodded, her resolve hardening. I believe I do. The trail of evidence leads to those who have sought to exploit our land for profit, despite our traditions and laws. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before she turned her gaze directly to Mr. Harrow, who stood at the back of the crowd, his face ashen. Mr. Harrow and his associates have been vocal about their desires to develop the land around the heartwood. While I cannot claim with certainty without further investigation, the evidence suggests a strong connection. The accusation hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, all was silent. Then Mr. Harrow stepped forward, his expression one of outrage. This is preposterous. I am a businessman, yes, but I respect the laws of this town. I would never harm the heartwood. The crowd was restless now, the festival's spirit overshadowed by the unfolding drama. Mayor Thompson called for calm, promising a thorough investigation. Eldoria, her piece said, stepped down from the podium, her heart pounding but her conscience clear. As the festival continued with a somber tone, Eldoria found herself isolated, her revelations having drawn a line between her and some of her townsfolk. Yet she felt a quiet strength, knowing she had acted in the best interest of Eldoria. In the waning light of day, as the festival drew to a close and the investigations began, Eldoria stood once more beneath the heartwood. Its leaves rustled softly, a sound that, to her, felt like a whisper of thanks. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to defend the heart of Eldoria, no matter what it took. The festival might have ended, but the fight for the heartwood, and for the soul of the town, was just beginning. As the last echoes of the festival faded into the cool evening, Eldoria was left in a state of quiet unease. The jubilant laughter that usually marked the end of the Heartwood festival was replaced by hushed conversations and contemplative silence. Eldorians were grappling with the revelations Elara had brought to light, and the town square, usually left littered with remnants of celebration, was tidy, as if reflective of the town's sudden sober mood. Elara, feeling both the isolation and the weight of her actions, walked slowly through the emptying square. The Heartwood stood tall and somber in the dimming light, its plight having drawn the town's attention in ways that went beyond botanical concern. Elara's heart ached for the tree, an ancient friend in pain, but her resolve to save it had only strengthened. In the days that followed, the council acted swiftly, spurred by the public's demand for transparency and accountability. Investigations into the chemical found at the site were expanded, with environmental scientists and legal experts called in to assist. Elara was asked to lead a special committee, an honor that both validated her efforts and burdened her with new responsibilities. Her first act was to establish a conservation zone around the Heartwood. No development was to occur within this zone, ensuring the tree's safety from further harm. This decision was met with mixed reactions. While many applauded the protective measure, others, like Mr. Harrow and his associates, protested, their plans thwarted by what they called overzealous environmentalism. Elara knew that creating enemies was a risk of her crusade, but the necessity of her actions was clear. She spent her days closely monitoring the recovery efforts around the Heartwood, her evenings buried in research and planning. The town council, previously a distant entity to her, became a frequent collaborator, and she found unexpected allies among its members. One late afternoon, as Elara inspected the new growth on the Heartwood, a sign that the treatment was working, Mayor Thompson approached her, his demeanor less formal than usual. "Elara, your work has opened our eyes," he admitted, looking up at the sprawling branches. "We took the Heartwood for granted, assumed it would always be here as our steadfast guardian. You've shown us how proactive we need to be." Elara nodded, appreciating his words. "It's more than just saving a tree," she said, her gaze thoughtful. "It's about preserving our heritage and ensuring our environmental policies reflect our values." The mayor agreed, and their conversation turned to future initiatives, including educational programs on conservation and more stringent environmental protections. Elara felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this ordeal would foster a greater appreciation of nature within Eldoria, inspiring other communities to follow suit. As the season changed, so did the Heartwood. It began to thrive again, its new leaves a testament to the town's collective effort to save it. Elara watched this transformation with a sense of pride and fulfillment. Her bond with the tree had deepened, a silent pact between them that she would continue to be its champion. One crisp morning, with the first frost hinting at the coming winter, the town gathered once more in the square, this time for a ceremony to celebrate the Heartwood's recovery. Elara was asked to speak, and as she stood before her fellow townsfolk, she felt their support, their gratitude. "This tree is a symbol of our resilience and unity." Elara addressed the crowd, her voice clear and strong. "Let it also be a reminder of our duty to protect and cherish the natural world. We must be vigilant, always, and act with courage when it counts." Applause broke out, resonating through the square, as the Heartwood stood proudly behind her, its branches swaying gently as if in agreement. The festival of the previous year seemed a distant memory, replaced now by a sense of community and a shared commitment to safeguard their environment. Elara knew challenges lay ahead, but with the support of her community, she was ready to meet them. As she looked around at the faces of young and old, she knew the fight to protect Eldoria's soul had truly brought them all together. The Heartwood, once a silent witness to the town's history, was now a living symbol of its future, a future Elara had helped secure. As autumn's golden hues transformed into the stark, crisp whites of early winter, Eldoria embraced a new rhythm, one underscored by a collective commitment to stewardship and community. The Heartwood, its leaves a vivid testimony to revival, stood at the center of this transformation, a beacon of both change and continuity. In the weeks following the Heartwood's recovery celebration, Eldoria found herself at the heart of Eldoria's environmental initiatives. Her days were filled with meetings, educational workshops, and planning sessions. She had become something more than a botanist. She was now a community leader, an advocate for the environment who drew people together for a cause that extended beyond the borders of their small town. One particularly crisp morning, with the first snowflakes of the season swirling gently down, Eldoria walked through the newly established conservation area surrounding the Heartwood. She was not alone. Walking beside her was a group of local students, their breath misting in the cold air as they listened intently to her explanations about the local ecosystem. Every species plays a role, Eldoria explained, gesturing to a squirrel darting along a frost-covered branch. From the smallest insect to the heartwood itself, each is a thread in the tapestry of our environment. When one thread unravels, it affects the whole. The students, wrapped in thick scarves and bright, eager eyes, absorbed every word, their presence a clear sign of the town's shifting perspectives. They asked questions, their curiosity boundless, about everything from the science of soil conservation to the policy changes that had been implemented to protect the heartwood. Later that day, back in her office, Eldoria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The desk was cluttered with plant samples, community outreach pamphlets, and a stack of environmental study proposals. A knock on the door announced the arrival of Corvin, who had become an unexpected ally in her efforts. Since the festival, he had worked to realign his business practices with the town's new environmental priorities. Eldoria, I've got the proposals for the new green spaces, Corvin said as he entered, laying a thick folder on her desk. His former aloofness had given way to a more grounded demeanor, one that spoke of genuine commitment. Thanks, Corvin, Eldoria replied, flipping through the documents. These will transform the unused town lands into something beneficial for everyone. Corvin nodded, looking out the window at the Heartwood standing tall in the distance. It's a new beginning for Eldoria, isn't it? Thanks to you. It's thanks to all of us, Eldoria corrected gently. It took the entire community to embrace the change needed to protect what matters. Their conversation drifted to future projects, and the upcoming town council meeting where Eldoria would advocate for more robust environmental education in schools. Each step was a seed for the future, sown with hope and care. As the year drew to a close, the town square once again filled with the residents of Eldoria, not for a festival this time, but for a tree-lighting ceremony. The Heartwood, adorned with lights that twinkled against the twilight, was more than just a Christmas tree. It was a symbol of the town's resilience and unity. Eldoria stood among her fellow Eldorians, her heart full as she looked around at the faces illuminated by the soft glow of the tree lights. Children laughed, their cheeks rosy from the cold, elders chatted warmly, and all around her, the community came together, stronger and more connected than ever. This year has taught us the importance of looking after our environment and each other. Eldoria addressed the gathering, her voice clear and strong against the winter air. Let this tree remind us of what we can accomplish together, and let us continue to protect and cherish our natural world, for ourselves and for future generations. As applause and cheers filled the square, Eldoria felt a deep, fulfilling peace. The challenges of the past year had indeed brought them closer, weaving a community tightly knit by shared goals and dreams. The Heartwood, aglow with lights, stood proudly, a living testament to Eldoria's commitment to a brighter, greener future. As winter deepened its grip on Eldoria, the frosted branches of the Heartwood stood stark against the sky, a silent sentinel watching over the town as it celebrated a season of renewal and unity. The chill in the air was brisk, but it did little to dampen the warmth that had spread throughout the community, a warmth kindled by shared purpose and newfound respect for nature and each other. Eldoria, wrapped in a heavy coat, walked through the town square early one morning, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. The Heartwood, now a vibrant emblem of the town's resilience, was more than a backdrop to her daily activities. It was a constant reminder of what they had fought to preserve. Its branches, heavy with snow, seemed to reach out as if in gratitude. The town had scheduled a series of workshops and events focused on sustainability and environmental education, all stemming from the initiatives Eldoria had helped to implement. Today, she was to meet with a group of local artisans who were interested in using fallen branches and other natural materials from around the Heartwood to create art that would symbolize the town's commitment to environmental awareness. As she approached the designated meeting spot, she saw the group gathered, chatting animatedly with cups of steaming coffee in their hands. They greeted Eldoria warmly, their faces bright with enthusiasm. "Eldoria, we've been thinking about how to incorporate natural dyes and materials into our work," one of the artisans, a weaver named Marianne, explained. "It's a way to honor the Heartwood and its story." Eldoria listened intently, offering suggestions and noting down ideas. The project was shaping up to be a beautiful blend of art, education, and community spirit. "It's projects like these that truly embed the importance of conservation in our daily lives," she noted, her eyes reflecting the clear, bright winter sky. Later, as the workshop concluded, Eldoria walked back towards the Heartwood, her mind filled with plans for the coming spring. The town council had approved her proposal for an annual Heartwood Day, a festival to celebrate the community's environmental efforts and to educate future generations on the importance of ecological stewardship. Her path crossed with Corvin, who was on his way to the council building. Since their partnership had begun, he had shown a genuine dedication to altering his business practices in favor of more sustainable methods. "Eldoria, the council's excited about the spring festival plans," Corvin shared, matching her stride. "They believe it could set a precedent for other towns to follow." "That's the hope," Eldoria replied, smiling. "Every small action adds up, and if we can inspire others, the impact could be significant." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden flurry of snow from the branches above, a gentle reminder of nature's presence and power. They both laughed, brushing off the snowflakes. As they parted ways, Eldoria paused at the base of the Heartwood, looking up at its towering form. She placed a hand on the textured bark, feeling the pulse of life beneath her fingers. The tree had become more than just a symbol. It was a teacher, a guardian, and a friend. Reflecting on the past year, Eldoria felt a profound connection to the cycles of nature, the growth, the decay, and the renewal. "We learn, we adapt, and we grow," she whispered to the Heartwood, her words a vow to continue her efforts to protect and learn from the natural world. As she turned to leave, the first hints of dawn painted the sky in strokes of pink and gold, the Heartwood casting long shadows on the snow-covered ground. In this quiet moment, Eldoria realized that her journey had not just changed the town but had transformed her. Eldoria was no longer just her home. It was her legacy, a testament to the power of community and the enduring strength of nature. With the Heartwood behind her, and the town ahead, Eldoria stepped forward into the light of the new day, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities it might bring, guided by the lessons learned under the watchful branches of the Heartwood. As the early winter dawn broke over Eldoria, the town awoke not just to the biting chill of frost-laden air but also to a palpable sense of renewal that had begun to weave itself into the very fabric of the community. The Heartwood, resplendent with its frosty mantle, stood as a towering testament to Eldoria's resilience, its branches now a sanctuary for the winter birds that chirped a lively symphony, greeting the morning sun. Eldoria, standing before her cottage with a steaming mug of tea, watched the town stir to life. Children bundled in colorful scarves and hats made their way to school, their laughter mingling with the crisp winter air, and shopkeepers swept the light dusting of overnight snow from their front steps, their breaths visible in the cold. The transformation of Eldoria was not just in its renewed environmental focus but in its spirit. The challenges of the past year had galvanized the community, knitting them closer through shared trials and triumphs. As Eldoria took in the scene, her heart swelled with pride. She had ignited this spark of change, but it was the people of Eldoria who had fanned it into a flame. Today marked a significant milestone, the unveiling of the Eldoria Community Green, a project born from one of the many initiatives Ellara had championed. Situated on the edge of town, near the Heartwood, the green was designed to be a gathering place for all, a space for markets, outdoor classes, and community celebrations. The project symbolized a new era for Eldoria, one that balanced development with sustainability. As Ellara walked towards the green, her thoughts turned to the journey that had led here. Each step felt laden with memories of the battles fought and won, the alliances forged, and the lessons learned. She remembered her first tremulous steps into advocacy, driven by a deep-seated need to save the Heartwood, unaware of the broader impact her actions would catalyze. At the green, townspeople congregated, their faces bright with anticipation. The area was a vibrant tableau of community collaboration, benches made from locally sourced wood, gardens planted with native flowers and shrubs, and educational signs about local wildlife and plants, illustrated by local artists. Mayor Thompson, who had become an ardent supporter of Elara's environmental policies, greeted her warmly as she approached. "Ellara, this," he gestured expansively to the green, "is a testament to your vision. Eldoria owes you a great debt." "It was a collective effort, Mayor," Ellara responded, her eyes reflecting the clear blue of the winter sky. "This is what we can achieve when we come together with a common purpose." The ceremony to inaugurate the green began with children from the local school choir singing an anthem about the land and its beauty, their voices pure and hopeful. Ellara listened, moved by the simple truth in their lyrics. This was what they were fighting for, a future where nature and community thrived side by side. After the speeches, as people milled around, exploring the new space, Ellara felt a gentle tug on her sleeve. She looked down into the bright eyes of a little girl, clutching a drawing of the Heartwood. "I made this for you," the girl said shyly. "Because you helped save the tree." Ellara knelt down, accepting the drawing with a smile. "Thank you, it's beautiful. You know, this tree is very special. It's a bit like us, it needs care, and when we look after it, it grows strong and gives back to us, just like our town." The girl nodded, her expression serious. "I want to help take care of it too when I grow up." "And you will," Ellara assured her, her heart full. Standing up, she looked over at the Heartwood, its presence a comforting constant in the landscape of change. As the day waned and the shadows lengthened, Ellara felt a deep contentment. Eldoria, with all its quirks and charms, was more than a place. It was a community united by a deep respect for the land and for each other. The Heartwood continued to thrive, each new leaf a symbol of Eldoria's enduring strength and commitment to the future. Reflecting on the day, Ellara realized that her role had evolved. She was no longer just a caretaker of nature but a custodian of a legacy of stewardship that would flourish long after her time. With a final glance at the vibrant scene before her, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that Eldoria was on a path to a greener, more united future. Thank you for sharing a moment of your day with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Really helps a lot. If you don't, well, I'll still love you. Thanks for stopping by.